There it goes. All right, Mr. David. So I have been doing with the other interviews, it's kind of starting off, and if you just want to talk a little bit about how you got into bees and your guys' operation and your honey operation specifically, and then I'll have some questions for you about kind of what's going on with honey, if that works for you.
I'm fine.
All right.
Well, I'm Dave Hackenberg. I got started keeping bees in 1962 as a VOAG project. I was born and raised in middle of Pennsylvania, Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, on a dairy farm, and I went to high school in the next little town over called Mifflinburg. And I was in the FFA and VOAG, and my dad got hurt in a farm accident. We were milking cows. He got hurt in a farm accident. A load of hay went over top of him, and so eventually we had sale, and I was raising veal calves for a VOAG project, and we ate a lot of honey, and so I got a hive of bees in 1962. And by the time I got out of high school, I probably about 150 or 170 hives of bees. Things were pretty easy back then. The only thing we really had to worry about was foul brood and American foul brood, and pretty much, keep the bees fed, and everybody was happy. In the next several years, we built the outfit up. There was a lot of crown vetch being grown in Pennsylvania for seed, and crown vetch doesn't make any honey, but it was a pollination contract, and we got into renting bees, and eventually we had several thousand hives of bees. I ran, lots of bees. I mean, several thousand for years. Besides the fact that we got in the honey packing business and packed a considerable amount of honey up until 1994, when our warehouses all burnt to the ground in a major fire. We lost $1 million. So we had to make a decision what we're going to do, and we decided to become better beekeepers. And so kind of put the honey packing aside for quite a few years. And my son came back home, and him and I had a partnership. We've kept bees together up until several years ago in that partnership, and eventually with the partnership, the way it was written, my son basically took the bee business over. I've always been in the trucking business. Besides, I own several trucks because I need trucks to haul bees. And besides hauling bees, we haul other freight, and so we continue to be in the freight business and steel and other things that the local have my own customers, and so we're staying busy with that. And at the same time, I'm still involved in the bee business. I told Patty Sundberg some time ago, the president of the American Beekeeping Federation, that I'm a beekeeper by heart, but I don't even know the hive of bees. She said, "Well, you always be a beekeeper because that's where your heart really is." And I'm involved. I'm still involved with beekeeping politics. I made it to Washington last summer, and working on some other things behind the scenes here, and trying to make this bee industry a better thing for everybody coming down the pike. I remember the good old days when you just put the boxes on the bees and you kind of walked away and made a crop of honey, and you went hunting and fishing, and and the bees did the work. Nowadays, we got to do the work, and if you miss seeing the bees for about 2 weeks, the bees aren't there when you get back because something happened. Throughout our years, I said earlier about packing honey, we've gotten, as my son took over, we started to develop a lot of business with mom and pop beekeepers, small beekeepers that have a few hives in their backyard but don't produce enough honey to fill their needs for their customers, and what they need to pack. And so a lot of our business is based around mom and pop beekeepers that we supply honey to up and down the East Coast, all the way from New England. And we got customers here, even in Florida. I'm in Florida right now, and as far west probably as the Illinois, and so on and so forth. It's kind of an interesting deal. You call your order in on Tuesday or Monday or Tuesday, and coming by the end of the week, you bring your buckets. We fill your buckets, whether it's 1 bucket or 200 buckets. We have your order, and we can. So you're basically getting raw honey. We basically heat it enough to slosh it. It's not been filtered. basically it came out of the tank and from the bees. The other good part or part of our business, the thing is the fact that we do a lot of varietal. Right now, I think Davey's probably pushing out 7 different varieties, more give or take. He's got raspberry, wildflower, buckwheat, orange blossom, western clover, and from several different locations. And every part of the country's got honey. It tastes a little different, and then we've got our own honey that comes out of a New York, Pennsylvania area. It's kind of a nice blend of uh, good mild clover honey, and so you got a pretty good business there. And a couple of years ago, we were back and start back to packing a little bit of honey, mostly by hand. And I built a new bottling line and much spare time, I guess, a couple of years ago, and kind of not real big and fancy, but at least you can dump the jars in one end of the table and they come out the other end filled. So that's like the one young lad who works for us says, I used to put 50,000 caps a year on by hand. Now all I got to do is put the jars in the case. The caps are already there. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
As I said before, my heart's in bee in business. I served as president of the American Beekeeping Federation at the turn of the century. We had a lot of issues back then. We continue to have a lot of issues. I'm still involved with Pennsylvania and Florida beekeeping and serve on both their advisory boards here. And one of our biggest issues right now in this country, the biggest issue, several big issues, this bee business there's always something going on. And if it's not going on today, wait 2 days, it will be going on. But, many of you know, we've had this severe loss this winter of bees across the country. Fortunately, as we weathered this thing, and I've got my own opinions why we weathered it. We can go into that a little later, but and the other situation is the honey market. There's no market here. I mean, other than you're creating your market like we are. Unfortunately, the commercial beekeeper is up against the imports, and not only the imports, but the fraud in the honey industry. And the fraud is not just here in the United States. The fraud is worldwide. And if your listeners follow what's going on, Germany this past year took some pulled samples off their shelves. 80% of what came off the shelves was been tampered with, sugars, wasn't honey, or was blended with something that wasn't really honey. England's numbers were even worse than that. I think their numbers showed close to 90%. Several of us feel that the honey coming into this country right now, what's being brought in on the import side is probably 45 to maybe as much as 70% of it is frauded. Either isn't honey as a manufactured product or something that has been blended out. And then we have the packers, the major packers here that say, well, I gotta contend with my neighbors, and I gotta go up against them. So they're blending the stuff that they're bringing in from the outside with American honey, and just basically making another product that's not really something that would pass a rigorous testing procedure. I know this for a fact. We have pulled samples. We have bought. My son and several other people are in the sugar business, from sugar that sweetener that for bee feed that can't be sold for human consumption, whether seal is cut in the trailer, or numerous reasons why we get these products. But Davey, my son, been involved in that since I was involved in it, but he has taken that part of the business over, and we move tons and tons of sugar product across the country every year. Everything from trailer truck load to dry product and liquid product to railroad car loads of liquid sugar from place to place. But in doing so, we also come across when plants are being shut down for one reason or another. We are offered all kinds of things, everything from flour to who knows what. And occasionally we're offered honey,
Really?
usually in usually in totes that went to this facility to for bakeries or food, whatever. And we have actually got honey that has been certified, by the, the organization that's certifying everything in this country and claims they're the ones that are putting out the true stuff. But we have picked up samples, had them tested, and the results are the fact that is we know there's something wrong with it. The testing shows there's something wrong with it, but it's such close. It's blended so close that it'd be hard to take these products to court and make a court case out of it. So when you talk to some of these large packers, they'll tell you, "Well, we got papers. We have papers for this stuff." Well, I can get you papers for anything. I mean, papers are pretty easy to get. And so one of the problems we have ran into in the food in the import side of thing is we have spent a lot of times with Commerce and Food and Drug for the last. In fact, my first visit to Food and Drug was actually in 1975. I was asked to go there with a lot of older gentlemen and myself. Basically over sugar in those days. I mean, honey was being cut with sugar. And we went to visit Food and Drug, and I remember this like it was yesterday. The people from Food and Drug said, "Well, has anybody died?" And after nobody said anything, a few minutes, seconds went by, whatever, I'm pretty vocal. I said, "Well, it's kind of hard to ask them because dead people don't talk." And Food and Drug wasn't really impressed. Well, that's the same attitude we have today. Commerce, who oversees all this, their answer is, "Well, we look at 1/10 of 1% of all the paperwork, 1/10 of 1% of all the paperwork." And they pride themselves. In the last meeting we had with them, not more than a little less than a year ago, or I wasn't there, but some of the people that we sent there, they pride themselves in the fact that we only pulled one sample in the last 3 years. So if you're not sampling this stuff, you're sure not going to find. So we've been working behind the scenes on some legislation. It's probably going to go to Congress yet here in the next maybe month or so, and can't talk a lot about how it's going to work at this point. But we've got to. I mean, and this is the way this thing is written, and through the congressman that wrote it, and he already has some other congressional people backing him. It's not going to cost the taxpayer anything. It's going to be a program ran, and it's going to be the beekeeper's not picking up the tab. So I can't talk more about it than that. But I mean, we'll see it here in a few weeks, month in the news probably.
So what do you think are some ideas that we can do to kind of start mitigating some of these issues and start kind of raising the price for honey here in the US?
Well, I think if this legislation goes through, and actually, right past week, and right now, actually, Brett 80 is over in Paris in Europe, meeting with some other worldwide people in the bee industry to talk about some of this stuff. We have some new testing. We have some new testing that basically is going to be able to follow DNA. And a lot of these tests that are out there right now, the tests are good, but if you don't crank the dial up high enough, I mean, if you got a scale, 1 to 36 or whatever on some of these issues. I mean, if you're down at the bottom end of the dial and you're only testing, with a scale like goes to 1, I'm just using that for a number, but anyhow. If you're not looking at crank the machine up all the way, you're only getting what you're looking at. So, I mean, this is what's going on right now. A lot of the packers are saying, "Well, I'm testing honey." Well, they're testing it, yeah, but if you set the dial low enough, you're only getting part of it. So you're letting part of that go by. We know, I mean, some of us that are in the inside know that there's already been 6 machines brought into this country a few years ago that are honey manufacturing machines. They're basically the size of a truck container. There's 6 of them came in. They came in from over in Asia through one of the California ports. We have no idea where these 6 machines are. They could be sitting in anybody's backyard, hooked up to whatever.
Mhm.
So, I mean, and the technology's out here to make something that looks and smells like honey. And so the only way around this, basically, to really beat it, is to follow a DNA. And so, I mean, the machinery or the technology is there, and there's a laboratory in Europe that has developed this thing. And like I said, Brett's over there right now, and in fact, today's Monday, Tuesday, he's probably touring with the scientists that have developed this thing and sitting and looking at some of this technology today. But uh, it's going to take a lot of technology to beat this thing because it's organized crime. I mean, the importers, the shippers of this stuff in the other countries know what they're doing. The importers know what they're doing. The people that are packing it, and the end result is that the people, the end users, especially in the food business, manufacturing business, they're well aware of what's going on. I mean, they're well aware when you're buying honey for $1 a pound, processed honey for $1 a pound or $1.25 a pound. And, the price of honey is, to the beekeeper is, even at today's depressed prices, is $1.50. You're sure not getting honey in that drum or that tote or that tanker. The problem is that a lot of these big food manufacturers, they're not really interested. The people that make cereal and so on and so forth, all they want is the word honey on that product. They're not so much worried about what is in that product as something cheap that they can put on there, and they get a bill of sale that they said, yeah, we put honey in our product, because the consumer is associating honey as something that's got value.
Yep.
And so we're fighting an uphill battle. One of the things is we've got to, when this legislation comes out, we're going to have to be able to convince, especially the grocer lobby, that you want your consumers that are buying honey off the shelves, you want them buying something that's real, or do you want them to buy something that's not real? And so every beekeeper out here is going to have to, when this legislation comes out, we're going to have to get really aggressive and to get this passed. I mean, the people that are backing it, the people that wrote the legislation, are really, I mean, they're convinced that it's going to fly, and I hope they're right. But I also know that the food manufacturing lobby is huge, and unfortunately, the majority of the big packers in this country are basically on the food manufacturers instead of the side of the beekeepers.
Hmm. So as you look at this coming year, obviously there's been a big bee loss throughout the industry, or what's coming out to look like a big bee loss. Obviously, that's going to hurt beekeepers, and then you come up with bad honey prices throughout last year. That's also going to hurt beekeepers as well. Is there anything that you see that we could do now to try to get our honey prices up for this coming, summer and fall, to try to help some of these beekeepers out?
Not anything that's gonna, this is not something that happened overnight, and unfortunately, we're not gonna be able to fix it that fast. I mean, I think when this law gets, this legislation gets passed, of course, it's gonna have, once it goes through the House, it's have to go through the Senate too. But things move at a slow pace in Washington. And hopefully with the way things are going now, maybe things will move a little faster. I don't know. But back to the situation with the bee situation. And yes, the losses are more, I think the losses are more tragic than we really understand or believe. I'm the guy that's been accused of basically discovering CCD, and I just tell people I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. But the numbers that we have seen in 06 and 08 and 05 and some of them bad years back then, what we're seeing out there right now, I think surpasses this by a lot. I'm hearing numbers on the field of, could be as high as 1.5 million hives of bees. That's half the commercial bees in the United States. I don't know what we're going to see. I don't know what the northern beekeepers, the hobbyist sideliners are going to see when they're opening their hives up this spring. What the result's going to be there. The good news is the scientists are working 24 hours a day, right through. As we're speaking, the samples have been sent off to some labs at Cornell University and other private labs to be looked at for pesticide. What's in these samples for pesticide? The viruses are being looked at this point. Jay Evans and Zach Lamb, who basically overseeing the research or the investigation or whatever you want to call it, of what's going on here. They have come out last week and have said that it's definitely not a mite issue. Mites are not the problem. We've been told by the chemical industry and others that our problem is mites. Well, mites aren't the problem. Mites are the problem because of. I serve on the Pollinator Stewardship Council, and yes, mites are a problem, but the mites aren't the problem. Mites are just they're the result of something else. I go back to the days when roa mites came, and I was one of the first people to basically encounter roa mites. And in the early days, we could have 50, 100 mites in a roll and a test, treat that colony of bees, and they were good to go. Nowadays, if you got 3 mites, 5 mites, that colony is probably going to bite the dirt. And this is all because of the fact that the immune systems have been broke down. And the reason the immune system has been broke down is these chemicals, these systemic pesticides, mainly in neonics, their method of killing bugs, whether it's corn borer or the aphids on the soybeans or whatever, is they don't kill anything. They break down the immune system. And so, and unfortunately, the widespread use of this stuff has gotten to the point that there's no water. There's no water in the United States, whether it's in the mountains of Colorado or in the lakes and wherever or whatever in your backyard. There's no water in this country that you can test that doesn't have neonicotinoids in it. And bees gather water. And how we're gonna solve this problem is I don't know. It's beyond me. I said earlier that my son's operation has weathered this thing pretty well. In fact, our bees are probably, or I should say his bees. I think we said before, I don't own a bee hive. I'm just whatever. But anyhow, we had losses. Don't get me wrong, but we've had probably one of the best winters we've had in many, many years. And one of the things that Davey has done is he has jumped on this probiotic bandwagon. Some of the scientists and others in the industries tell you that probiotics don't do any good. Well, probiotics in the bees is like probiotics in people. Probiotics in people only work as long as you're taking it. And so if you're taking it, it works. It cleans you out, helps your immune system, and so on and so forth. If you stop tomorrow, well, then you don't have, it goes away because it's not there. My son has been continuously feeding probiotics 12 months out of the year for the last year and a half. I mean, he's been told by some pretty outstanding people in the industry, scientists and people working for chemical people and everything else. Well, it's costing you a lot of money. Well, yes, it's costing a lot of money, but a dead beehive is costing you a lot of money. You know,
Oh, yeah.
if you don't have a hive of bees, you can't produce honey. If you don't have a hive of bees, you can't rent them. And on top of that, it costs money to make bees. And so if you don't have bees this time of year to make bees, you're up against something else. And you know, unfortunately, uh, bees are going to be in short supply to buy nukes packages. I'm sure with the late spring we've had packages. Well, I'm no ifs ands and buts about it. Packages are going to be late. Nukes are going to be late, especially coming out of the south where it's been the weather hasn't warmed up. I mean, I talked to a friend of mine in Mississippi a couple of days ago, and they were looking at temperatures in the 20s again. Well, you can't, you know, and they're only starting to see their first round of brood starting to hatch. So it takes a while to get going to get bees that are ready to uh, shake for packages or making the nukes or whatever. So it's going to be an interesting year. And talking to graders, guys that are grading bees in California. Unfortunately, even the bees that are in the almonds aren't good bees. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff there that a normal year wouldn't make grade. Whether hopefully the beekeeper is going to get paid. I mean, this is not the beekeeper. You know, it's not a beekeeper. It's not bad beekeeping. There's something else behind this whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, I'm hoping that, you know, the growers uh, pay these guys, you know, accordingly. I mean, I don't know how this is going to work out, but uh, a lot of beekeepers are, you know, are and hard up. I've got calls from several people around the country. Most of them I didn't even know that called to pick my brain. What do I do? You know, well, you know, I think the first thing is I believe in the Lord, and I believe that God's in control of a lot of things, and you know, you put your faith in Him, and get down on your knees and talk to the Lord about this and ask Him for guidance because it's above what we can do.
Absolutely. So when you look at the bee loss and there's going to be should be a shortage of bees for sale after almonds as well as shortage of bees for the pollination afterwards. How do you think that's going to affect the honey supply this year? And do you expect that the honey price should go up due to there not being a large amount of bees to produce honey this year? Or do you think that we're going to be able to build up our numbers before honey season really kicks off?
I don't think there's any way to build the numbers for the honey season kicks in. Unfortunately, there's a lot of honey still sitting. Last year's honey still sitting in warehouses in the West. I mean, especially in larger beekeepers that have honey sitting that they just haven't sold because they can't afford to sell honey to price what they're going to do. I mean, and I know some of these guys personally that are sitting on a lot of honey.
Mhm.
What happens this year? Um, about the price, I don't know. I mean, we do need certain amount of domestic honey, and I hope that the price, we see it. I don't think the crop. I don't think there's any way we can look at a big crop of honey because we just don't have the amount of bees going into spring that is going to be able to. It's going to take a lot of these guys almost all year to rebuild, and some of them aren't never going to be able to rebuild. When you have guys that have 90% losses, and some guys as high as 100, and even 80% losses, there's no way in the world you're going to be able to build this outfit back. Uh, I mean, you might be able to build the whole numbers back over the period of the year, but there's not going to be a honey crop. You're going to have to sacrifice honey crop to make, and it's I've been around for 3/4 of a century, and I've never seen anything like this, and it's beyond me. I mean, uh, it's just mind boggling, and unfortunately, you know, if it is pesticide related or environmental related, what guarantees that it's not going to come back again next year? I mean, it's just what we don't know.
So one of the last questions I have for you is, there's a lot of people that when I talk to them say that the U.S. couldn't produce the amount of honey that we consume due to the fact that there's not enough forage. Do you believe that that's true?
Well, I believe, unfortunately, we don't have good forage. Um, you know, our forage our environment has been contaminated. So the fact is that yes, we don't have roadsides that don't have sweet clover, and we don't have the clover in the fields and the dairy farms and what was here when I was a young guy. I mean, that kind of stuff. Yes, there's areas around that have. There are areas that have some. Don't get me wrong, but enough to produce the kind of crops that we produced back in the 50s and 60s, where we were making 250 million, 225 to 250 million pound honey. I don't think them days we'll ever see. Yes, I believe that we could change some of that. I was involved this winter and we're still involved with uh, several of us trying to work on uh, maybe a way to set aside some of these row crops and with because of the price of row crops, and plant some more beef pasture, real beef pasture, not prairie grass and orchard grass and that kind of thing is set aside, but some real honey producing plants. Unfortunately, we don't. The federal government doesn't have a lot of money to help with stuff like this, and so I don't know where it's going to go. I mean, we had a meeting in Reno at the American Beekeeping Federation. About a dozen, 14, 15 of us met, and I've talked to Congressman G.T. Thompson, who's a good friend of mine. Glenn is a close friend of mine. I talked to Glenn about this. He's the head of the House Ag Committee. Talked to his legislative guys, and they told us come back with some ideas, and so we put some stuff together. But things are slow up there. I mean, because everybody's trying to clean house and straighten things out. So when we'll be able to get this before them, I don't know. There's been a lot of changes even going on inside the offices of some of the congressmen, and so I just don't know. I mean, but it's going to be a long, hard road, and we each got to try to, and in our backyards at home, try to convince people that you got to plant more bee pasture. I mean, I'm not talking about the gardener and all that. That's great, but we need lots of bee pasture, roadsides, and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, a lot of our state highway departments are still out there spraying, with herbicides. And herbicides take out our, the food we need for honeybees. Not only our honeybees, but our wildlife, and our birds and so on and so forth.
Well, I really appreciate you talking with me, and I look forward to seeing what's going on with the legislative stuff that you guys are trying to push. And if you ever need anything, just let me know.
All right. Appreciate you getting a hold of us, and have a good day.
You too. Bye, Mr. David.
Thank you.